Yeah, I don't think we'll get into much about the new meme coins being launched by the administration on this space, but plenty of time to talk about that continued part as we go on. I'd like to thank all of our listeners and, of course, our panel today. We're going to be not doing community questions, but we'll be hitting them the ground hard. Again, as always, if you have community questions, please join our Discord and ask away, and the team will answer them. Very special space today. We have Injective and our IO team. Uh, let's start with a brief overview from each of our panelists. Injective, let's start with you.
Yeah, so my name's Abhi. I'm on the business development team at Injective. And what Injective is, for the listeners who might not know, is we are in Cosm Wasm based L1 right now, developing our EVM side as well. So every dollar of unit, whether it be a stablecoin or a DApp token that you have on either end of the Cosm Wasm or EVM, they'll be interoperable. You can use them side by side. But we're effectively built for finance, and we look at finance by the means that anything of value can be transferred globally for free 24/7. But yeah, thank you for having us on.
We were just talking a moment about Trump coin, but one of the other big narratives that's been happening in our space over the last couple of weeks is DeFi AI, and it has been increasing. For those in the audience that don't have a full understanding, or maybe have just heard this word in passing, could someone give a description of what that is and how both IO and Injective are positioned for it?
Yeah, sure. So what DeFi AI is, it's effectively you have a lot of these agents that are coming on blockchains and in the real world and Web2 business as well. So what DeFi AI does is that it allows these agents to do financial transactions on behalf of you yourself. So that could be a trade, like a perp trade on a perp exchange, like we have Helix, or that could be you have an agent and you tell them to, I have $100 of USDT. How can I maximize the yield? And it kind of takes that money and puts it into different yield farms across crypto. But there's no one exact use case, I would say. I think it's very experimental right now, but there's a lot of untapped uses that DeFi AI can't handle for everyone.
And before we start talking about some of those use cases to the IO team, we've been talking about DeFi AI, but for those that haven't tuned in, how is IO connected to DeFi AI, and why is this an exciting time for us?
Sure, I can jump in on that. Can you guys hear me? I had a little bit of trouble with the mic.
Loud and clear.
Awesome, awesome. So in terms of how IO in particular relates to DeFi AI, right? I think in terms of how I would describe IO itself, we're sort of like the foundational layer of decentralized compute underlying all AI use cases and applications, right? Like whether it's model training, inference, fine tuning, things like that. So when it comes to DeFi AI, I like how it was described before in terms of, we don't necessarily know what the use cases are out there. I think people understand the possibilities of what AI agents can do in DeFi AI today. But I think the actual design space is massive. And I think what the wider adoption of this will look like is still anyone's guess, right? So I think in terms of where IO fits into it, I think actually enabling a lot of these AI agents to conduct these DeFi transactions on chain, where every time they make a decision to sort of optimize yield across one protocol or the other, or do sort of financial analyses to decide where capital is best allocated on chain, that's a significant amount of inference time that each of these AI agents need to constantly do in the face of changing financial data and prices that happen constantly on chain. So I think with each of those actions that an AI agent takes, that's an inference workload that can be run on IONet, and IO can power it using our decentralized GPU network, right? So I think that's an area where I think IO fits in really nicely with how DeFi AI is enabled. I think the other aspect that's really intriguing is once sort of the actual use case rails of AI agents being able to perform actions on chain and being able to be sort of like DeFi AI agents sort of takes hold. The next aspect of evolution will really be in terms of how these AI agents differentiate amongst themselves, right? Because in the same way today, people select various, like wealth managers or hedge funds or mutual funds where they choose to deploy capital based on their investment returns. People will start allocating their capital to specific AI agents who are able to provide outsized returns compared to other AI agents or the broader market in general. And the developers who are building sort of these more sophisticated DeFi AI agents will likely have to do a significant amount of fine tuning or sort of like data structure optimization or retrieval augmented generation and things like this to make sure that their AI agents are constantly able to beat the market and maintain an edge and are able to sort of absorb more capital from capital allocators and thus have an edge in the market, right? So I think with each of those AI agent fine tuning and sort of like optimizations that need to be done, there's a significant amount of sort of like fine tuning training compute that also needs to be used, which can come from IO in a decentralized manner. So I think there's a lot of foundational ways that IO can sort of support the overall DeFi AI ecosystem and movement.
Let me ask, it was mentioned and it's been touched upon about use cases. We've seen a lot of potential and existing use cases. Let's define that between your degens, your heavy DeFi users, and those that might be new onboarding to DeFi. Again, going back to the attention that's been happening from individuals that don't know as much about crypto that are now getting into it. What are the use cases that exist for both of these groups?
Yeah, so I can take that. So let's start with degens. The use cases for degens, as it is right now, it could be, suppose there are 20 different meme coins that just launched in crypto on crypto at once. The DeFi AI could be an engine that gives you metrics, whether it be number of holders, number of sniper bots that control supply, the amount of volume for 5-minute volume, 10-minute volume, 1 hour volume, kind of gathers up all those metrics. And then out of those 20 meme coins, it gives you what it believes has the highest probability of going higher over the next set time period. So I think that's a pretty cool use case for more of the degens in space. One use case for more so traditional DeFi users and or more risk-averse users that are crypto native, it could be what I mentioned prior is yield farming optimization. Suppose you have X amount of money and you want to earn risk-free yield, or not risk-free, but you want to earn yield on that capital without taking a lot of negative drawdown on your principal. So it could be a DeFi agent that kind of scours through all of the yield that's available on chain and tells you which one is the best for you to park your money in given a certain time period. And the last one you mentioned, non-crypto users. So I think one of the biggest problems in crypto that has persisted is that it's still difficult. The onboarding is still difficult for onboarding someone who has $0 in crypto. Kind of first buy his or her first crypto token, kind of open up a wallet and do all of that. So all this can be abstracted away if there is, suppose, a DeFi agent slash front end slash um wallet where you can put in, like, you can wire in or you can put in $100 in cash, and then you can tell him or you can tell the agent to, I want to I want an index of the best AI tokens in crypto. And they can do that for you without having to kind of bridge manually or go cross chain and do all that crypto native stuff that is very difficult for non crypto natives to do.
And to the IO team, you've all talked about what to look for on the dev and builder side when thinking about a compute network. Thinking about those case studies, is there anyone in particular that seems more, if you're building on any of those, that should be something you should be thinking about? Decentralized compute network. Tassif, you mentioned some use cases. Do any of those stand out as priorities in it at all?
To be honest, the way the industry is headed, I think in the near future, you will have companies or industries like be it DeFi or others who use AI, who are who basically wither out over a period of time, right? And when we start talk about DeFi and the use cases, right? So, or even the AI industry overall, I think any vertical industry that is data intensive, which requires transparency, or can benefit from the decentralized infrastructure, basically maybe the adopters or the early adopters of the DeFi technology. Because like basically when you're combining the AI intelligence with the DeFi openness and efficiency, then the sectors can unlock the new value streams and can basically drive innovation at scale, right? And it will be in every sector, whether you talk about institutional finance, asset management. Let's say you take an example, right? Like hedge funds, what do? They basically can use AI today to analyze liquidity pools, basically across multiple chains, identify arbitrage opportunities, and execute trade basically autonomously using smart contracts, right? Uh, Now, the whole decentralized concept itself will help this DeFi industry to bring trust. So basically, more adoption, right? Similarly, in the gaming and metaverse side, same thing could be said. You can come to the real estate and the corresponding tokenization of the asset which is happening there. Same case. You can talk about supply chain. You can talk about renewable energy. I think any market you touch right now, you will see the decentralization penetrating that particular market and AI penetrating that market more and more. And I think where Injective and Ionet will succeed is that like the Injective team has created this whole like AI kit which will help the builders like greatly to focus on just the business problem which people want to focus on, and all the other statements and abstractions which they normally have to build for, that will go away. And where IO helps them overall as a player, for both Injective and the builders on top of Injective, is that whenever the startup comes in, they have to really think of the scale, the resilience, and the cost, right? And IO brings those values to the table, that our inventory is decentralized. So whenever there's a spike of requests for that AI model which is getting built on Injective, they don't have to worry about that, right? The startups which are coming in, they don't have to worry about the cost of the infrastructure on which they're building, right? They don't have to think about there's any centralized players which can bring the whole company down in future if it start to get traction and if there's anything gray area, right? Because it's basically resilient to censorship. So overall, you'll see all these industries benefiting in time going forward. And I think Injective and the IO partnership, which has happened, that will play a major role in the months to come. You'll see.
Injective, let me hand it over to you. We're talking about the partnership. Where do you see it on your side of the equation?
Yeah, so we see it in a very similar manner. So the way we see it is that the Injective SDK that we built out, I think TLDR just comes to right now, we believe that we're in the very early experimentation stage of DeFi AI. And how do you most benefit from the early experimentation days is that you give developers, you decrease the friction to experiment and to build for developers. So in that case, what Injective did was we built out an SDK, which allows developers to kind of plug and play and easily build out DeFi apps on Injective. And what we really loved about this IONET partnership was that okay, now they have the SDK to build out these dApps, but they also need compute and like just to make that easier for them, so they don't have to worry about where do we source compute for inference. They can just come to IONET and use that um in a very similar plug and play manner, where it's all kind of available to them really easily. So all they have to focus on is experimenting and just trying new stuff out to see what works and what doesn't work.
And speaking of friction, first I'll ask you, Injective, where do you see the friction happening now, and where do you see that evolving as the space continues to evolve?
Friction in what sense? In what part
Uh,
of the stack?
yeah, the friction that you mentioned that you're solving with your SDK and the partnership with IO in building compute network.
Yeah, so I think there's two key points where the friction lies. So the first key point is just giving developers the tools to build out these experiments really fast. And then I think the second friction point, which is much later in the kind of curve, is actually finding product market fit with these dApps, DeFi dApps. So I think right now we're at the stage that we're trying to solve the first part of the friction, where we're giving developers all of the tools, kind of build out an experiment, and just increase the amount of experiments launched every day, every week, on an every month basis to kind of increase the probability that one of the experiments kind of finds PMF and kind of like blossoms over time.
And IO, over to you, same question.
Yeah, I can jump in terms of sort of how we think about reducing friction points, right? Especially from a decentralized compute perspective. So I kind of really like to start to think about these problems like from the end user perspective, right? And the developer perspective in terms of what they're actually trying to optimize for when you're trying to build sort of, the most sophisticated DeFi AI agent that's going to attract the most capital and offer the best returns. And it kind of almost takes me back to sort of how hedge funds think about optimizing their returns from a technical perspective as well. So I think there's three things that I kind of think about in terms of reducing friction and enabling DeFi AI developers to be able to sort of build the best agents they can on a decentralized compute network. So I think in terms of what we offer, I think first and foremost is sort of the permissionless access to compute, right? Through IONet. I think this one is fairly underappreciated in this context because, theoretically, sure, an AI agent could go get compute from an AWS or Google Cloud or something like that too. But I think having that permissionless access sort of really offers up a benefit in use cases where, crypto finance and DeFi is a 24/7 market that moves very, very quickly. And the last thing you want is for your DeFi agent to get liquidated because it got stuck in a support queue at AWS, right? Because it couldn't get access to compute or had a billing error or something like that. So I think having access to compute through a permissionless network like IONet is going to be sort of one of the de facto things that any DeFi AI agent is going to need in order to be able to ensure that it can accomplish its directive in the most effective manner. The other thing I think about, and kind of connecting to the hedge fund example again, is sort of the idea of latency, right? Like I talked about, sort of all these DeFi agents needing to perform constant inference to analyze different market trends, different market data, prices, volumes, things like that, to be able to make the best investment decisions. And one of the things, like the amount of optimization around latency in the traditional finance world and high frequency trading is such an important issue that a lot of like hedge funds actually have their IT infrastructure located like close to where the exchanges are, so that they have the data that they need for their investments, with an advantage of milliseconds above other competitors, and that can make the difference at high frequency trading. So very similarly, the optimization around latency time will be really important here. And I think with our distributed compute network on IO, we're able to actually offer incredibly reduced times when it comes to latency for inference, because we're able to provide the node closest to where the inference is happening, right? Like whether the user is in Indonesia or Brazil or the US or Finland, we have GPUs available everywhere. So the time for an agent to perform inference and get a response back after it's been computed is massively reduced compared to that same inference workload, or every inference workload having to go to US East or wherever, the massive data center from AWS is located, to be able to give you an answer. So I think that's an area where we're reducing a lot of friction too. And I think lastly, it's also just cost reduction, right? Like as these AI agents look to optimize the returns that they offer for their DeFi users, every user is going to want to look at which AI agent is able to have the least overhead as well, right? So that they can provide more of the returns back to the users providing them capital rather than having to spend it on compute. So to take it back to the hedge fund analogy again, it's hedge funds often charge the 2 and 20 model for management, right? Like 2% management fee, 20% on returns. So in a very similar manner, I think, and different hedge funds compete on sort of like what take rate they take on the capital allocated to them. So very similarly, I think with AI agents, if they're able to reduce the cost of this compute usage by using a decentralized network like IO and reducing that friction point, they're able to sort of provide greater returns back to the users who will allocate capital to them.
And speaking of AI agents, how does Injective's iAgent framework enable the seamless integration of AI agents? Could you give some details about what exactly is under the hood?
Yeah, so I can't speak too much about the technical aspect of it, but the TLDR is that it kind of the framework itself provides seamless integration onto the Injective blockchain and network as well. So whenever you're using the framework, you can easily build that and kind of add that agent. Let's say, for example, to trade on Helix, which is a CLOB. It's a perpetual and spot CLOB that's built and embedded within the Injective network itself. So it kind of gives you that seamless composability that a lot of other, suppose, frameworks might not offer with their base chain.
And a follow-up question I have is, Tosca was talking about in two levels, friction, but also what you had mentioned, after experimentation comes scalability. What have you noticed in terms of scalability? So after the experimentation is done, and a builder has created a successful app, where do you see the next stages of friction, of work that needs to be done in our space?
Yeah, so I think that, look, to be honest, I think we're still very, very early. We're still in the experimentation part of this. I mean, it's like a month, or it's only a couple months old that we've seen a lot of these AI agents pop up. I still do not believe we've had like any agent find product market fit and move on to the second part of the stage. But I still think that we're still there. Everyone's still experimenting. There hasn't been too many other problems outside of just experimenting, getting deep and continuous access compute, which is being solved by IONET. But I haven't seen the second part of that friction really come out to date. But I also believe we're very, very early in this
So,
meta.
I think I'll take a different stab at it, right? I think there are some fundamental problems which always exist in system, and if you basically solve that fundamental problem, your rate of growth is exponential post that, right? So, for example, like be it any company, right? Normally, when the company starts up and they start to become bigger and bigger, the first thing they try to optimize on is actually on experimenting. That how, as a company, I can change, let's say, my pipeline of development so that I can change more changes quicker in less time, right? How many developers at the same time can make changes. So all the Web2 companies or Web3 companies basically optimize their tech stack and operations in a way that more experimentation could be done, because that enables more development in parallel, more changes to go in the outside world in parallel, see what matters faster and what is basically clients liking, and then build on top of it. So these are like one of the fundamental, being able to experiment fast with minimal need of changes is one of the fundamental things. If you can do it well, you have exponential growth, right? That's one. I think that's where this particular thing that which the Injective team is doing, I think, as in, like, it's a very fresh concept. They have taken a first stab at it. When they become matured, more and more people know about it, I think there'll be a huge adoption and people will see a value, and it'll just keep like becoming more and more bigger and important in the industry, you'll see, right? And the other thing which I feel is a fundamental change also is that if you take a look at the centralized players, right? For example, let's take about AWS itself. Like, why many players use AWS, right? They can just go and take a bunch of bare metal machines from somewhere and build on top of it. Why do they go to AWS? Because they have the ML kits there, which their teams can use. They have deployment pipelines on AWS, which they can use, right? Whenever they want to scale their CPUs and GPUs, they have that software stack. So what happens in that case is that whenever startup comes, and let's say if they only have 8-10 people, those 10 developers or ML scientists will predominantly focus on the problem statement, not on the periphery problems of creating the infrastructure and all that. They just focus on the business problem, and those kind of companies succeed faster, right? And that's where the ROI of each developers matter, right? Now, what has happened with this partnership is that Injective is solving the AI agent kit side of the problems, that the developers, when they come, they have less amount of friction when they build their businesses. They don't have to they don't have to focus about other integration and all those things with the SDK which these guys have given, right? Where IO comes in picture is that IO is giving that cheap compute that when a startup even have a low amount of funding, they can still build on top of it, right? They still will be censorship averse, right? They still can scale at a very high level, and they'll have access to the strongest of GPUs at the cheap price, right? So this partnership will enable developers to build confidently, iterate many times faster, and can experiment at a very cheap price, which is the fundamental values any like a startup would look out for. I think that's the way I take a look at this partnership and what both these teams are bringing to the table.
Awesome. Awesome. What's up, guys? I'm Zach from the IO team. Really excited about being a part of the Injective agent kit. And I guess just being that this is our weekly spaces and we have a lot of people who don't have background on Injective and what you guys have done and kind of the impact that you guys have had in the space. Do you mind just giving us some background for listeners that are less familiar on the history of Injective and how we've gotten to this moment, and how you guys stand out in this crowded DeFi L1 landscape?
Yeah, for sure. So some background about Injective. Injective launched a couple of years ago. There's two co-founders, and it launched initially as a simple perp text using the Cosm Wasm stack. And then shortly after, they realized that the biggest benefit of launching or using crypto rails to launch an exchange is the composability aspect that crypto offers that TradFi doesn't offer. So then they launched Injective, which is an L1, and then Helix is the perpetual and spot DEX embedded within Injective itself. So you can think of it as any DeFi protocol, any token that is built on Injective is seamlessly can be used on Helix itself. And this lends out to very cool um, very cool and innovative ways to just add more capital efficiency into finance. So I guess another thing is that Injective is like tailor made for financial applications, and one example of this could be, suppose if there was a DeFi agent that is building out a hedge fund strategy where it allows anyone to deposit capital and it trades it on behalf of its users. One thing you seem to do on Injective is that suppose you put in $10 of your money into this DeFi agent, then you could take that LP share that you got from that $10 and deposit that onto Helix to trade perps yourself. So the end goal for like Injective is that it's built with composability in mind and with capital efficiency in mind, is to bring not only crypto native DeFi and prop that up, but also work on bringing traditional capital, whether it be real assets or other stuff, on chain, and really grow finance in that sense.
Cool. And then I guess like what are some exciting real world use cases that you've seen? I mean, I personally like to call it AI-fi, but DeFi is the popular colloquial term. Yeah. So what are some exciting projects that you guys have gotten some inspiration from on this SDK? And I guess what do you find most exciting going on in this AI fi space at this moment for Injective?
Yeah, definitely. So there's the example I just gave about a, the so I think one thing it's also it's like DeFi, like DeFi DFAI or agentic fi, but yeah, the naming's really it's hard to say, but the example I just gave is there's a developer right now using the Injective SDK to build out a agentic finance hedge fund where people can kind of give this agentic agent money, and then the agent will trade on behalf of them on Helix itself, and then kind of distribute earnings on a monthly basis. So I think that's very cool. Where instead of going back to the hedge fund analogy you used here prior, instead of giving a human your capital to invest on behalf of you, now I think shortly soon we'll be seeing people giving agents their money to earn yield and profit, on top of. And I think one long term difference that this is going to make into market structure is that it's going to be much more capital. It's going to be much more efficient, where there isn't going to be a lot of different price discrepancies between different sexes and different dexes for Bitcoin, let's say, because of many more players, whether they be agents, kind of neutralizing the price discrepancies.
Cool. Yeah. So RIP to the people who are trading on those opportunities. And then I guess what are some current limitations within either DeFi or AI, whether that be I guess interchain operability. I guess what limitations do you currently see in the way for this space specifically, and hurdles that we'll need to get through in order to have a fully functioning AI fi environment? Yeah.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. Go ahead, Injective. I think they were about to say something.
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
So I think the first thing is we need to have enhanced usability and accessibility in the first place. So I still believe there are several key developments which need to occur, which is across your technology, your user experience, or your regulatory side, and overall as a ecosystem building side as well for this whole DeFi space to grow, right? And it starts from the first one, which is your enhanced usability and accessibility, right? I believe the AI agents must become more intuitive and user friendly, so that it can becomes more seamless to use both for crypto natives and the newcomers. I genuinely haven't seen till now uh, basically an agent where a complex DeFi agent uses NLP, and you can say simple things like where can I earn the highest yield on my ETH, and the AI agent could just handle this research, do the transaction, staking automatically, and end to end do everything, right? uh, I'm surprised nobody has done a multilingual support till now, right? Any good AI agent should provide services to a global audience, right? By offering support in multiple languages. We don't have that. One of the things I think, which I feel in many areas in crypto, including the DePIN or DeFi, is that I don't know why we compete a lot between ourselves, and we don't work together as a vertical or an industry to become better, right? I've seen that there's no unified standard API, right? The collaborations like Injective and I have done, there are not many collaborations like this, which basically create synergies and the better value in the lesser amount of work as protocols, and giving more services and value services to the customer. I don't see that, right? On the security and trust side, there have not been many innovation being done, right? Many of the projects still on the DeFi side, I don't have the auditable code, right? The transparency isn't there. Their models which they're deploying is still not there, visible to everyone, right? Similarly, There are more models itself which should be created where, like, you just throw those models on any smart contract which comes, and it audits it, and transparently show the results to everyone in the audience. And then if it's good, then deploy it, right? So that everyone knows what's happening, what were the different issues which came in this code, which the respective protocol was thinking of deploying, and if they have done the fixes, what the second version of the review was, and so on and so forth, right? So people actually have confidence in the industry overall, that that what the teams are doing is real, is auditable, they can read, understand it, and even if there was wrong, how it was fixed, and how soon it was fixed, and what was the final outcome. There's nothing around there, right? The interoperability across the protocols and chains is still very bad, right? There's not much innovation being done on the AI agent side, where it's seamless to work like across multiple DeFi protocols, blockchains, as a holistic solution. I think this is one area where, as an industry, we can become better, right? There was always there's a part of cost. I think that with a lot of deepins like us has been solved. There's some issue with the real-time data also. I think these are few friction points which exist in the industry technically, which could be taken a stab at, and we'll be better as an industry. And then obviously there's the whole education piece also, that still there's a lot of friction from Web2 giants and these great builders who know how to create these distributed system. They're still not coming to the Web3 side, because we as industry are not educating them enough about the benefits of the decentralization, the tokenomics, and what they can take advantage of this whole blockchain ecosystem and crypto ecosystem. I think that education is also not being spread out. And obviously, the last piece, which is a problem, is the regulatory clarity, right? The regulatory uncertainty around the DeFi and the AI could really hinder the adoption, right? A clear framework will create confidence in the ecosystem. And I think the new government which has come in, like, everyone's really hopeful that like the best days are coming pretty soon, right? So I think that's all which I had. If these are things which are solved, like, we'll be much better than industry.
Cool. Awesome. And then I guess you guys at Injective, if you want to answer the question about other hurdles that you guys see in the way. And then I guess, another side question for Injective is us at IONET. We're happy and excited to be also partnering with the likes of Creator Bids, Cerebro, and AI16Z in the space. And then I guess outside of things going on at Injective, what do you guys find most exciting within the crypto AI space or the AI fi space that's kind of inspiring to you guys?
Yeah, okay. So that's a lot. Let me break it down. For the first question, I think it's best to view like what was like the it's best to view the current challenges as going back to the analogy of who's the user. So we can split up the users as crypto degens, crypto natives with that are more risk averse, like funds or whales, and the last one being people who are not crypto native. Um, so we'll split up two ways. For the first one, I think thus far we've seen the most activity for these crypto agents or DA5 among the meme coin traders slash DJs because they tend to be more risk averse. And a lot of the tooling that's being built out, or a lot of the tools that have a lot of usage thus far, have been trackers of like deep trenches. Is this like what's the probability that this token's a rug or not? So I think that has found really strong product market fit. But going to the crypto native whales slash funds, I think a big problem is you guys mentioned it, is that security is still unclear, and it's difficult to give a AI agent, let's say, a large sum of money if there hasn't been any Lindy effect that it is safe and he will not lose my money, or there won't be a smart contract risk where I kind of lose all of my money. Kind of going back to the early DeFi days where there's a lot of different borrow lending protocols on Ethereum, but over time there are only a lot of the large crypto players feel comfortable in allocating capital onto MakerDAO or Aave just because they had survived months and years worth of usage, and whereas a lot of the other borrow lending protocols kind of like died and got rugged a couple of times, and the smart contracts were not safe. So I think that's a similar thing's going to happen with DeFi, where it's going to take some time for the projects to prove that the smart contracts themselves are safe and that they are the returns that they promise, or whatever the product might be, is that's sustainable over time. And the last part regarding people that are not crypto native, I think that comes down to, again, you guys mentioned this as well, is just accessibility, where it's still not at the level that if you want to create a Snapchat account or a Instagram account or TikTok account, it's much easier to do that than create a account with like a DeFi agent that manages your money. So I think it's a hurdle that's going to pass over time, but that's probably the biggest friction onboarding new users into these products now. And sorry, what was your second question?
My second question. Well, first of all, like I just like to acknowledge that. Yeah, I think like that's the total end dream, that these consumer, um, the regular consumer can come into the crypto world through one of these bots and not have to worry about bridging to Solana, bridging to ETH. Just that it all works seamlessly, and they just see the fee alongside it. And then the second question was just outside of things going on at Injective, what do you guys find most exciting and inspiring right now at the moment in the crypto AI space or the AI-fi space?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. So I think the thing that excites me and excites us the most is the amount of net new talent and net new developers coming into crypto for the first time. So we haven't really seen this kind of bloom in talent in crypto for a year or so. It's been a long time, but the crypto AI or DeFi has really encouraged a lot of my Web2 friends to kind of work in traditional tech or work in the AI non-crypto world, kind of give a stab at crypto, kind of play around nights and weekends, kind of see what they can build in crypto. So I think that's the most exciting part, where we're seeing a lot of new talent come into the crypto industry because of crypto AI and DeFi.
Let me pass the question of new talent to the IO team. You all have talked about, and mentioned on this call about friction for new developers, people coming into Web3 and the issues facing them. Do you see with DeFi AI any other unique challenges, or do you think that it follows the traditional developer breaking into Web3 challenges?
I can take a stab at it. I think, in terms of new talent entering the market, I think sort of like this AI agent boom has really been kind of a boon for the overall sort of crypto space, right? And I think it's sort of like really inspired a lot of net new developers with sort of broader skill sets to enter the market, kind of explore sort of the various like toolkits and SDKs and sort of like programming languages that are available in the blockchain space, and really try to come at it with a fresh lens and build on top of it from this lens of AI agents, right? So I think, as Avi mentioned, I think it's been like a really exciting time of seeing all the people pour into crypto again, after sort of like the bear market of 2022, when a lot of people left the space. I think people are kind of coming back, and in sort of a larger, almost an order of magnitude more than what was before, because not only are we attracting sort of classic like Web3 developers, but a lot of folks who have never touched Web3, have never thought about crypto before, have been sort of primarily in the AI ML space or experimenting with AI agents. I think they've started to discover a lot of the benefits of being able to build AI agents on crypto rails, like the benefits of like permissionless finance, like access to sort of like decentralized compute, data oracles, things like that. Like a lot of tools, I think they're starting to sort of have this aha moment of realizing that a lot of what we've been building in crypto and Web3 for several years are a natural fit with what AI agents actually need and how they'll likely operate in the future. So I think this marriage of AI and crypto and DFAI, I think has sort of like really created a new paradigm of development and sort of really opened up kind of the design space, right? And Zach, you mentioned a few of the folks we've partnered with, so Shaw at AI16Z, like Jeff Augustine at Cerebro, or great examples of that. Like there were folks who were primarily on the AI agent side, or sort of fully in the AI development side before, came into crypto, did a lot of interesting experimentation, and have now built sort of like billion-dollar projects, right, in a short amount of time, and have also sort of like enabled a lot of other developers to build on top of sort of the foundational open source stuff that they've done. So I think it's a really exciting time for the future of AI and crypto, and for talent coming into this space.
Let me ask everyone on the panel, like, what do you say to people who say, great, this is just another bubble. We've heard all of this before about onboarding new people, that things are going to become easier, that we're getting interest from outside the space that's happening. What makes this sound different? What are you all seeing in use cases, technology growth, from conversations you're having and just generally looking at the space?
Yeah, I think it can be both, right? It can be both a bubble that's kind of blown up over the next couple of months or years, but also have really strong fundamentals where the teams building out some of the projects will sustain over the next decades to come. So I kind of agree with both takes that there are fundamental use cases. For example, right now, a lot of the low-hanging fruit's been being solved in the trenches. And how kind of new tech usually evolves is that kind of it starts as the first adopters tend to be the most risk on people, and then over a longer time horizon, kind of shifts onto more risk averse people kind of start using similar products using the underlying technology. So I think the underlying technology of agentic finance makes a ton of sense given how it can increase composability in financial markets and increase capital efficiency within finance. And finance is kind of built on top of capital efficiency. So fundamentally, it's sound. But that being said, I also see it kind of being a bubble over the next couple of months to years, given the amount of interest. So I think both are true.
I think for me personally, it has not been hard in my previous experience and now in IO also to basically convince people to come to the crypto side, because if you break it down, right, I don't think in crypto companies there is any more risk compared to a Web2 startup also, right? Like it's the same risk in a crypto startup as you have in a Web2 startup, right? The percentages more or so will look similar, right? In terms of the problem statement which you solve, I think like crypto has more interesting problem to solve compared to a lot of Web2 giants, to be honest, right? And practically speaking, the velocity at which the crypto companies iterate and build is far faster compared to any Web2 company, right? And at the end, engineers are builders, and they like to work on interesting stuff, ship it in front of people, get their feedback and build on top of it, right? That's what excites them the most, right? So that is practically there in the crypto company. Like imagine, like in IO personally, we're building cloud platform which took Amazon years to build, right? We're literally solving the same problem which Amazon did. So for a builder who has seen those products and they say, oh, we'll get the same product we built here in the next 1.5 years, there's so many interesting problems to solve that they're super excited, right? And practically speaking, I think the founders and the senior guys who are there in crypto, they'll practically tell you the salaries in the crypto companies are far better in the Web2 side, right? So it's you don't have to compete in that side also, because we do pay well in our industry anyhow. So attracting people in terms of the problem statement and this thing is comparatively easy. Like at least for me, it has been historically easy. The only thing I think as tech people we have to do is that when new people come in the industry, they get overwhelmed, right? For a new person who's coming in the whole industry itself, they're normally risk on. they can come and join any industry, Web 2 or Web 3, right? The problem comes in if somebody is a 12-year experienced guy, he's basically one of the senior most person in a Web 2 company. And for him to leave a Web 2 company, a comfortable job where he's proven his value and everything, to come in a Web 3 side where everything is new, for them, that's overwhelming, right? And over there, for those guys, for make them an easy transition as leaders, we have to break it down that we are basically solving a problem which will cater to a Web 2 side also and Web 3 side also. And here is a plan for you that in the coming 6 months, this is the problem statement you will solve, which will predominantly Web 2 focus, distributed systems, and slowly and steadily we will train you on Web 3. And as long as you show that transition plan to them, those senior guys are comfortable. But if you just throw all these learnings to them in one shot, which is blockchain, distributed systems, decentralized system, and all these other tokenomics, then it's becoming overwhelming. And those kind of people don't transition well or are afraid to make that jump from Web 2 Web 3. I think that's where this transition and explaining things helps a lot.
Just to add a few things there too. Actually, I'm going to go back to Avi's point on bubbles that he made earlier too, and kind of how that plays out, right? So, kind of as he mentioned, there's a couple different ways to look at it, and I think often people kind of like look at bubbles as sort of like this evil thing, in financial markets. But I kind of really think of it as sort of being a natural sort of part of technological innovation and progress, right? And that's kind of really what we're doing here is with DFAI and AI agents, we're sort of at the bleeding edge of technological progress and what is really possible to do in finance and crypto and AI. I think historically with bubbles, like whether it's related to, the internet or railroads or crypto, I think what it really sort of, tangentially is related to is this idea of experimentation, right? Which we talked about earlier as well. I think bubbles typically sort of are a breeding ground for experimentation, and it sort of like attracts sort of like this initial capital injection really attracts a lot of talent into the space, sort of breeds a lot of new ideas, gets people excited about trying out a lot of different things, trying to build and solve for a variety of different problems using this sort of like new technology. In some ways, a lot of those experiments don't end up working out. And, whether it's a company or a project or something like that, it can end up going to zero because maybe the technology just wasn't quite there yet, or like the adoption curve wasn't quite there yet. But what it really does to the experimentation is it shines a light on gaps and things that need to be solved for the overall movement to be successful, right? Like, yeah, as I mentioned, whether it's internet or railroads or crypto or AI agents. And what that kind of really does is sort of it helps the next generation of builders really sort of tighten focus and solve for those gaps and kind of identify what kind of things need to happen to enable the business to be sustainable in the long term, right? Like to take sort of like the dot-com bubble example, one of the biggest stories of that time or companies of that time was pets.com, right? Like getting pet food over the internet, which was sort of often used as this example of being a ridiculous business that described the hubris of the dot-com bubble, but now is a really major sustainable profitable business in the form of chewy.com. And I think you can kind of make that argument about a variety of different things, like whether it's like Airbnb or Uber or Instacart. A lot of those ideas were tried out in like back then in '99, didn't work out, but a lot of the builders stuck around on the internet, stuck around building apps, figured out what gaps needed to be solved, and then now they're multi-billion-dollar businesses. So I think we'll go through a very similar cycle where we'll have the Amazons and Googles who are being built now in an equivalent space and will survive whatever sort of bear market comes in the future. But I think the experimentation that'll come from this will really drive the overall space forward and ensure that the movement is sustainable for the future.
So as we close out, the first question I have of two ones left is what's in the pipeline that people should be paying attention to? I'll start with Injective.
Yeah. So on our end, is this particular to DeFi or Injective in general? As
Injective in general.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So on the pipeline, I think one thing that internally the team has been grinding on the past couple of months is our EVM mainnet launch. So that is probably the biggest thing that we will be soon going live with over the coming months. And that's again decreases the friction for developers to launch on Injective, because we realize that there's a fixed amount of developers comfortable in writing on custom code. So with this development and with the composability between our EVM mainnet and current mainnet, I think that's going to enable a lot more devs and a lot more action on Injective mainnet.
And I know there's a bunch of things coming up. What in particular is something that people should be paying attention to?
I think it basically attaches to the same question which you asked earlier. So when we actually plan for any quarter, we basically do the research. And like you asked, like whether it's a bubble, we don't see it's a bubble. Our research said that the whole AI agents is not just a Web3 phenomena. It's basically Web2 and traditional enterprises are equally invested, and which shows basically isn't a bubble but a universal shift towards smarter, more efficient systems across the industries, like in short. And what we are doing is we are creating the platform where all these AI agents can build seamlessly. So we are basically launching a IO intelligence platform where we'll have hundreds of models which exist already by multiple builders all throughout the industry, open source. And we'll basically take our strong inventory, put these models on those inventories, and will give this access of powerful models for free to the users, so they can actually build the next versions and the future of the models on our platform, right? That's the first phase, which we call IO intelligence. And we'll also promote more and more new companies of AI agents to basically build on top of it, provide a space on our platform to deploy and be accessed by like thousands and thousands of people going forward, right? That's just the first phase. And the second phase of the same product, we're building a platform where we'll like the developers will have access to the APIs, to the models, and to the access of data, where they can build new powerful models, where initially we will fund our GPUs for free till a certain limit for these builders, and beyond that we'll charge a minimal amount. And if these models are really good and will be used by a lot of people, then going forward we'll be giving incentivization to these builders to come deploy, build on a platform. We'll basically grow a whole economy for these Web2 and Web3 builders to come to the platform and build the future of the AI and AI agents at a very, very cheap price on the most stable and the cost effective platform of the compute there in the industry.
And then final question, let's say I'm a dev, I'm a builder, I'm excited about what I'm hearing. What are the next steps? Avi, with Injective, what do I do?
Yeah, the next steps. So you can like reach out to me or anyone on the Injective team, whether it be like Telegram or on Twitter, and then we can get you situated with some members of the team if you have any questions on developing on the engineering side or on the marketing and economic side. And but yeah, it's just kind of like we're all open to any DMs and all feedback. So reach out to any one of us or join our public builders Telegram, and you'll have other people help you there as well.
And then, Tassif, if interested in learning more about our compute network, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, a few different ways. So of course, feel free to reach out to me or Gaurav or anyone else on the IONET team here on Twitter. Feel free to email me at tassif@io.net. Also, of course, our self-service platform is available to anyone to go on and try out and deploy some clusters and start playing around with it to see what you need. If you feel you have more sort of customized needs or the platform doesn't quite meet the use case that you're looking for, there's also a contact us form directly on our IO Cloud platform where you can reach out with more specifics, and someone from my team will get back to you to help you get exactly the GPUs and the clusters you need to. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank Avi from Injective for joining us, the IO team, as always, for speaking. Of course, all of our listeners, excited to continue to collaborate and see what the future holds. And that's all, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time and invitation.
Thanks, everyone.